The applicant makes his or her presentation, commission members ask questions, members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners will discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and results of the voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has a discretion to either allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and planned unit developments. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decisions. Please turn off all your cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. I'm going to call the roll. I'm Jennifer Denson. Mr. Blackwell? Present. Ms. Sessions? Here. Mr. Atchison? Here. Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Amberger?
Here.
Ms. Rich? Here. Mr. Stubbs? Here. And Doug Anderson is here as well. So we will begin the public hearing process with our first application, and that is 2907 and 2911 2911 Dolphin Street, a PUD planning approval and a rezoning. Is the applicant here, would like to speak? Yes, sir. You could state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Paul Cummings, 1 Houston Street, Sabine. I'm a realtor representing the applicant. The application involves a subdivision of PUD and a rezoning. The subdivision of PUD involved here, part of what was tentatively approved on the December 19th meeting in connection with the Golf Point application on the portion that is between the subject property and the former Dolphin Estate. The subject property is approximately 6.9 acres, and it involves the remainder of the Dolphin Street frontage of the old Grand Terry property. The staff report is quite lengthy, and a substantial portion of it deals with points that will be addressed by the applicant's engineer. Therefore, I would like to confine my comments to the rezoning portion of the application. The property is currently zoned LD2, which allows the applicant to conduct all the activities that he's currently conducting in his present location at Midtown Park East, with the exception of the proposed theater. The applicant, Zayden City Central Arts, is an entity that diligent on finding available facilities for shows that he produces on an annual basis. The applicant produces 5 shows per year, and I believe that there are 3 performances per show, and those happen over the course of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday afternoon. And so that accounts for 5 weekends a year. The addition of the theater is what compels the applicant to request a change in the rezoning from LB2 to B2. There are numerous uses allowed in B2 that the neighboring property owners would not welcome, nor the applicant needs. Actually, the theater is the only thing that brings us here concerning zoning. Towards that end, the applicant has executed a voluntary use restriction document, which I understand is y'all have. Which eliminates specific uses covered under the B3 zoning designation. This list was composed with input from the seller and certain residents of Crawford Place, which is the residential development adjacent to the east of the property. At this point, I'd like to make sure the record reflects that there were 2 uses that got inadvertently left off the final draft of that use document. They were on the previous draft, and I don't know how they got left off, but we originally intended and we want to add bingo and liquor store. They were on the original draft, but it's just a typo. The intent is that they should be part of this. I'd like to point out that there is a substantial difference between the operation of a retail 10-screen movie theater such as Carmike and a performing arts theater like what the applicant wishes to add to his on-site operation. A 10-screen theater essentially operates 7 days a week. There's all kind of movies going on well into the night, even up till close to midnight, based on the movies. And I would submit that even though they're in the same pot as far as zoning, they're completely different operations. There again, with the exception of the theater, the existing zoning is sufficient. Therefore, with the proposed voluntary use restrictions, we feel that this change in zoning to fit this specific development is warranted and is a very low impact development as opposed to a whole lot of other things that could be allowed in LB2 or B2. Is that my bill?
Yes, sir.
It's not reasonable to assume this property's going to stay vacant and something's going there. And really, I would submit that this is one of the most compatible uses that I could come up with as far as something adjacent to a residential development. And at this time, I'd like to turn this over to the civil engineer.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for Mr. Colliers? Thank you. The staff has provided the commission with potential recommendations. I just want to point that out to the staff. Out to the commission. And I just want to make sure that the applicant has received them as well. We can have 3 more speakers in favor of the project.
Pardon?
That's part of the staff report.
Those are if the commission decides to recommend approval of the rezoning as well as approval of the planning approval and PUD, those would be the conditions the staff would recommend be included. The one thing I wanted to bring up, though, as Mr. Cummings has added bingo parlor and liquor store, we will need an updated voluntary condition and use restriction form with that added and signed before we could forward it to the city council. Okay.
I have a question, and I think it would be under the planning approval on the hours of operation. It says that the evenings in events would not extend past 11 p.m. Would there be a problem with putting that into part of the planning approval?
Could I defer to the applicant?
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Jay Brawlman, Driven Engineering, 8005 Morris Hill Road, Sims, Alabama, 36575. I'm just going to take a few minutes to go over some of the technical aspects of the site plan. Proposed building will be 65,850 square feet and provide 139 parking spaces, which exceeds the minimum requirements by 7 spaces. When we first started laying out the site, there was an extensive effort that went into preserving as many of the site's natural resources as possible. A tree survey was performed so that the footprint would save as many of the existing trees as possible, especially in the frontage along Dolphin Street and along the eastern property line. Also, it was laid out to maximize the landscape area with an emphasis on the frontage and on the east property side. Another important factor to consider is the impact of this development on flow of traffic and the surrounding infrastructure. So between Alta Point and the Zoe City Performing Arts Center, there will only be 2 curb cuts on Dolphin Street. Traffic report was performed and determined that this project will not result in significant enough traffic volume to adversely affect the surrounding streets and intersections. Further, the traffic that is generated by this development would occur during off-peak hours, and would not add to the congestion associated with rush hour. There was a lot of thought and respect given to Cromwell Place neighborhood adjacent to the property on the east side. And because of that, there's a 10-foot easement and a 10-foot landscape buffer and a 6-foot high privacy fence that will be there to provide maximum amount of screening for those adjacent property owners. Also, a 40-foot setback has been imposed to maximize the distance between the new structure and that property. This neighborhood has been historically affected by flooding and heavy stormwater runoff. Because of that, a preliminary stormwater analysis was performed to consider the water running onto this site from Cromwell Place, in addition to the runoff generated by the development itself. The basis of this was to establish that there was ample volume to store the 100-year post-development runoff and discharge at a rate less than or equal to the 2-year pre-development discharge. So there will be less water leaving the site after the project's built than there is currently today. Finally, there will be using exterior lighting to provide illumination for pedestrian safety while not affecting adjacent neighbors. Parking lot lighting, first and foremost, is a safety element, and the lighting design will utilize low-impact fixtures to the greatest extent possible while providing the required illumination for a safe pedestrian environment and meeting the required zoning ordinance. Now, innovative approach has been taken to maximize landscaping, preserve the natural features, and reduce the amount of stormwater flowing across the site. The goal of this project is not just to meet the design requirements. The goal of this project is to meet and exceed those requirements and add value to the community to result in something that will benefit all patrons and neighbors. I appreciate staff and planning commission's consideration on this, and at this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you all may have regarding the site plan.
Go ahead, Ms. Rich.
Is this a 1-story building?
I believe it is, I'm going to have to defer to owner
Okay.
for that.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Hold on
Oh,
just a second.
Sorry, go ahead.
So you said that you were trying to preserve the trees on the eastern edge of the property.
Yeah.
What are the size of the trees that are there now?
Look at the site plan. The purpose of preserving those trees is again to just maximize the buffer between
Mm-hmm.
between the neighborhood. But I think they range up to 12 inches in diameter.
What kind of trees were they?
Oak trees mostly.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. Have the next speaker,
Ms. Denson, while they're
Yes.
on their way down, I wanted to address for Ms. Rich, in their voluntary condition and use restrictions, they self-impose hours of operation. Generically, they place normal operation hours, normal business hours, Monday through Sunday, and then they have Friday through Sunday evening events not to extend past 11 p.m.
I saw that, that's why I was wondering whether they would, since they've already mentioned that.
Zoning and those conditions, that would be automatic.
I have a quick question for staff while we're talking about that. I'm looking at the chart of permitted uses here, and the theatrical production or symphony appears to be allowed by planning approval in B2, but is by right in LB2, which is the current zoning?
No, it's not allowed at all in
Okay.
LB2.
Okay. The chart has an R on it. Doesn't that mean by right?
No, there's a dash. You're on page 35 of 37.
See, the theatrical production is permitted. It's the middle one is LB2. Oh, right. The middle column
Is LB2, right? On
is
page
R,
12?
and it's LB2.
Okay, are you on page 35 of 37 at the bottom?
That, R says
We're holding a chart, page 10.
It's in the staff report.
Staff
And it could have just been a typo.
Okay. It is not allowed in LB2.
Okay, I was just curious
It
reading.
requires planning approval.
Okay.
Oh, that was a copy and paste from their initial submission.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Christopher Paragoni, Azalea City Center for the Arts, 63 Midtown Park East. I'm the man with all the answers to all of your questions. The Azalea City Center for the Arts started back in 2012. Sunnyside Theater, which is my company, along with Full Scale School of Music, combined to form the Azalea City Center for the Arts, which is a performing arts education facility that allows multiple businesses to operate under one roof, with the goal of promoting the arts in education of students, and we actually have adults taking violin lessons and guitar lessons as well. Sunnyside Theater, when it was formed in 2008, was formed with the mission of bringing the arts to as many children as possible across the county. We have outreach programs, not only what we do in our own building, but when we combined with Full Scale School of Music, Performance City Center for the Arts, we had a vision that we could create a facility where a parent could drop off their child and they could take a dance class, a music class, and a theater class all in the same building. Or two kids could take music while one other kid performed in a play. Of course, our limitation is that in our current facility, we do not have an actual performing arts theater, and so we don't get to do any of our own productions in our own building. We do use facilities around town, the Jefferson Playhouse and the Theater Guild, South Alabama, as a few examples. This new proposed building was born out of a vision that I had to create something special for Mobile. Mobile currently does not have a 500-seat mid-sized theater that's open to use. High schools have their own theaters, but there is no mid-sized 500-seat theater here in Mobile. And in talking to other arts leaders around the city, it became clear that I'm not the only person who really wants this. And so, we've talked with Mobile Opera, we've talked with Mobile Ballet, we've talked with Mobile Theater Guild. These are institutions that have been in Mobile and advanced the economy of Mobile, and all of them are interested in being able to utilize this facility in some fashion. For some of them, it will be rehearsals. For some of them, it will be performances. For some of them, it will be a small recital where the ballet can use our 150-seat black box to put on a smaller recital and not have to use the entire stage at the Civic Center. So in advancing the project, we reached out to the Alabama State Arts Council and received a grant to have some plans drawn up. We met with an architect, Paul Davis, and we've been kind of tossing around different ideas with him. And then once Mr. Cummings and I identified the property, the draft property, as a possibility, 6 cars in the parking lot that don't belong to a staff member. Because a lot of our parents come in, drop their kids, and leave. And we have never had any sort of a traffic issue on Midtown Park East, which is a much smaller area in town. And so the after-school traffic will not be impacted by our facility. As to the performances, if you go to a theater performance that's done by children, if it starts at 7 o'clock, pretty much everybody's out and locked up by 9. We did include the hours up till 11 for groups like the opera that want to perform there. I do want to stress that this is not a place where somebody's going to put on a concert. We're not going to have any kind of raging club parties, and we're certainly not engaging in any sort of late night activities. Thank you. The goal of this project is to bring something to Mobile that Mobile desperately needs. It's a performing arts facility that can be utilized by a lot of the cultural groups in town that have been in existence for an opera space. This will be year 75. And so Mobile needs a facility like this, and we identified this property as the perfect place for it because it fits all of the criteria as being convenient and family friendly. And we think that this is a great project for the city. We're good.
Thank you. How big will the building be? How many stories?
So as to the number of stories, it will be a 1.5-story building. Because of the nature of how you have to do theater seating, it will be something similar to this. I suppose. Is this a 1-story room or a 2-story room? I suppose technically 2 stories. It will have a fly space, so the height of the building represented on some of our drawings includes space to fly scenery in and out.
Are there any more questions by commissioners? Thank you. We can now take 4 speakers in opposition to the, oh, I'm sorry, we have one more speaker opportunity for the program.
Good afternoon, my name is Cynthia Bierman. I live at 2867 Hillburn Drive, Mobile, Alabama, 36606. Hillburn Drive is the road that butts up against this property, and I live in Cornwall Place. I'm speaking for the residents that are for this development in Cornwall Place. And also, my children have been going to Sunnyside for over 8 years. My child happened to see a play, Annie, 8 years ago, and saw the kids up on stage and said, I can do that. And she's been doing that ever since. She's also graduated to working at JJP and working through Mobile Theater Guild. And I'm old. I want to be in bed by 7. It doesn't always happen, but with these children's theaters, it really does allow for the young kids to be in bed and keep a good strict schedule. I have been doing performances with this group and other groups for, like I said, 8 years, and I've never seen a performance or a practice go past 11 o'clock. Really, if it's past 10, I'm grabbing my kids and taking them home because they're too crazy. You can ask any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Milburn, I am 3 houses from the area, and we're for it. All of the requirements that we've asked for have been met, and it's not a loud establishment. And even if it is 2 stories, it's not going to be a building that is going to be an eyesore for if it was some of the other developments that have been proposed. Oh, and one more thing. There's Barbara is on her 26th performance of different plays around town, and that's in 8 years. She really loves it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. So you said you were representing neighbors from Cromwell that were in support of the application. How many people are you representing?
We've talked to multiple people on our street and behind us. And my husband's an engineer, so he looked over the drainage plans and wanted to make sure all of those things were met. We went and talked to multiple, owners in the area. We had at least 8 to 13 who were for it, as long as those requirements were met. I know there are some that are on our street that are not for it, but I just don't think that they know the people who are involved, that can trust that what we put in place will actually.
Thank you.
Just a real quick question. Do you expect your kids to be able to walk here, or are you going to drive them around out to Dolphin Street and back in the driveway?
I think we'd be able to walk because, like I said, they're not athletic. They can't scale a 6-foot grass fence.
Just something I wanted to point out, and we build these things and protect them from the neighborhoods, and then wind up with something that kids in the neighborhood that use it aren't able to walk to. Not interested in blowing up this site plan, but just something we need to keep an eye on.
I would love that. There's no, good sidewalks down Dolphin Street in that area. So if I got to choose my project, I would put a sidewalk down Dolphin Street right here.
There will be a sidewalk. That'll be required. The city could do that.
Thank you.
Hope not.
And that is the 4 to speak in favor of. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application?
My name is Rosemary Phillips, and I own the 3 pieces of property immediately adjacent on Dolphin Street to this site. And in actuality, I'm probably lying to you and saying I'm in opposition to it at this point in time. I will say that I have initial concerns in regard to this. I addressed these concerns over with Mr. Cummings and people that were involved with this project. I will be first to say that this commission seen me done it numerous times. I'll be the first to say that these people were probably the most agreeable people to any suggestions that I have ever run across. As many of you know, I'm related to Grass. So I will say that first, just to put it out there. I was concerned in regard to the privacy, the lighting, what was gonna be next door, how much noise was gonna be, I was gonna be impacted by the traffic and whatever. I will say that all those concerns have been addressed by them satisfactorily to me. I was concerned about some of the uses that would pop up in B2. Of course, I was already concerned about some of the uses that could be available in LB2. And so they even restricted out some of those concerns too. Every concern I had, they addressed. So in all honesty, I'm no longer in opposition, but in fairness, I wanted to explain I was initially in opposition, not to the theater itself or the idea of the theater, but the things that came with that, especially with B2 zoning. But I think all of that has been addressed. They seem to be concerned for the neighbors, and I think that's important.
Thank you.
Questions?
Are there any questions?
You want my real address? 60 South Conception is the one I use for mailing.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone here else to speak in opposition to the application? All right. I just want to make sure that the applicant has, I saw that you received the recommendations by staff if the planning commission were to consider approval. Do you have any objections or are you okay with these recommendations?
We are okay.
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 Okay. All right.
I do have a question, if that's okay.
Go
And I
ahead.
didn't think to ask this of the applicant, and I don't know which one among the applicants, probably the gentleman who's involved with the program and the use. You've written out being a bar, lounge, or tavern, and I'm sure that gives the neighbors a lot of comfort to know that that will not be something that could go on. But if you're renting the space or whatever your arrangement is with the opera or with the symphony or any group that would need that 500-seat auditorium, do you anticipate that they would also then serve wine? Because we know that goes on in adult events. I'm not saying you'll do that with your children's theater.
I don't know, some parents would really appreciate it if I did that. There is no setup for serving any kind of food.
Okay.
If the opera did want to have a wine tasting event, because that could bring in money,
Yeah.
fundraiser for the opera, I think there might be the possibility if they were set up in the lobby and they serve some champagne and serve some wine. I don't foresee it becoming, I mean, we're not putting a kitchen here.
Okay.
So it's not supposed to be part of that.
For the staff, since they've eliminated the use of alcohol beverage as a trade to go on, how would that be handled from the city standpoint for the person that would need the licensure?
There's not a restriction from serving it, so I can't think of a way that we would prohibit it.
Okay. Because I think that has to be, in the beginning, well understood by people that will then use
Right.
the facility.
I don't think, based on what is submitted, has been submitted and is before the commission, there would not be a prohibition of serving alcohol with a particular production.
Okay.
Would that,
You serve ice cream.
would that allow them to sell alcohol for a production at the
To-
facility?
To serve or to sell, they'd have to get a special event license issued by the ABC board, which would have to be
Come up
approved
to council.
by the council.
Yeah.
Which would be in our building with whatever group.
Right. That's why I was trying to picture together how you're going to work with these different groups, but,
A standard rental contract. We have groups that rent our.
and that's good to know. Just saying.
We
Okay.
have groups that rent our facility now to put on parties or something like that. We have a standard rental contract that says you can serve cake and cake.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't get involved with the cake. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the second application. 130 west of Navco Road and 200 south of Farnell Drive. This has been recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant here? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? The applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Anyone here to speak opposed to the application? All right, moving on to number 3, 300 St. Louis Street.
Hold on, Madam
Sorry.
Chair. Were you two going to speak in opposition to the second one?
I'm sorry. Sometimes I move too fast.
Two. There was somebody.
We're back on number 2, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm Ruby Morris, I live at 2509 Farnell Drive, and this apparently backs right up to the property. I don't understand this a lot, and I was just wondering, what is this that's going to be built here?
This, hang on a second, sorry. Go ahead, yeah.
We do not have a specific use or a pending building permit for the site at this point. However, they are simply consolidating various parcels into one lot, and by state law, that's a subdivision. The property is zoned I-1, which is light industrial, so anything they propose to place there would have to comply with I-1 zoning. But at this point, I do not know of a specific use. The applicant may be able to provide that, but we don't have that at this time.
Okay, if they do, will they let us know what they've got there?
They can use this property for an industrial one use without having to come back before the city at all.
Okay,
If
because my
you
yard
want
backs.
to contact, I understand, but what this is for has nothing to do with change of use, just consolidating the land, like she said. If you want to talk with the applicants outside, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, thank
And
you.
he might be able to
Thank you,
tell
ma'am.
you more about their intended plans for the future. Thank you. Is there anyone here else to speak? All right, moving on to number 3, 300 St. Louis Street. This is recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? And do you agree with the staff recommendations?
Yes, ma'am.
The applicant is present and agrees with staff recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the project? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Number 4, 5536 Sermon Road West and 5660, 5680 Sermon Road North. The applicant has asked for a 60-day holdover to the April 2nd
Yes, I was just making sure.
Okay, to the
Showed up
April
just in
2nd
case.
meeting. This will most likely be granted, but did you want to make any comments at this time?
No, should give us enough time to get it worked out with the engineer.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You will have an opportunity at the April 2nd meeting to voice any support for or against, but you may also speak now. Is there anyone who wants to speak in favor of the project? Anyone who wants to speak in opposition? All right, thank you. Number 5, 256 and 260 St. Louis Street and 257 St. Anthony Street. This is recommended for approval. Is the applicant here?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you in agreement with?
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone here to speak in favor of the project? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Thank you. Number 6, new group applications. 7960 Old Government Street. We have a subdivision and a PUD. Staff is the applicant present? Okay, there was material, you had mentioned this to me and I think I forgot what you told me.
Okay. The
Oh, here it is.
subdivision meets the minimum requirements of the subdivision regulations and is recommended for approval. The PUD was initially submitted to be heard in January. We needed the subdivision, so we recommended the holdover. And there were also various elements of the application, specifically the site plan, that needed to be addressed. We did not receive a revised site plan addressing those needed revisions, so we have recommended denial of the PUD. If the applicant would like to have an opportunity to revise the PUD, we could then hold them over again, but we do need those revisions as soon as possible.
Okay. Would the applicant like to come up and speak about the? Did you?
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
My name's Jason Gibson. I'm Mr. Kirby's engineer. My address is 1979 Bayside Drive, Biloxi, Mississippi.
Did you hear Mrs. Pappas, her
Yes.
comments?
When I received the comments, I wrote Mr. Hoffman, I believe, sent him back the drawing. I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. I don't recall exactly when it was. But anyway, the corrections were made. I don't know if it was the correct way to submit the plans. However, I did send him those corrections. Mr. Hoffman, did you get those corrections?
You sent the corrections to me, but I didn't realize you were submitting them as part of the resubmittal application process.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's an error in there. It's obviously my fault as far as submission, but they have been provided, so I guess was the next step.
What we would recommend then is that we hold this over to the next meeting, which will be February 20th.
And from my part, what is the correct submission process, so we make sure I get it?
Bring it to the third floor counter.
Okay. 24 by 36. How many sets? One?
We would need 7 copies of the site plan.
7 copies, okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, there was one thing, you had comments about landscaping. there's just a totally separate landscaping plan, so I need to submit both of those together.
If you could get those to us tomorrow or Monday at the latest in order for us to be able to
Sure.
prepare revised reports.
It's no problem. I got them in my email. I think David wouldn't mind running the plans back down.
Okay.
Okay.
So then there's a recommendation of holding over till February 20th? Is-
I do have one more question.
Oh, sure, okay.
You says staff recommends tentative approval on the following conditions: It says dedication to provide 30-foot from Centerline and Glider Avenue. What does that mean? 30 feet of what?
That means Glider Avenue, because of the existing standard of construction, requires 60 feet of right-of-way.
Okay, so you want us to give you right of way through there?
Correct.
Okay.
30 feet from the center line.
Are we voting on that today? Because I need to look at the plans and see if that's,
We are asking for them both to be held over.
gotcha. Okay, so we're good till the 20th.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Anyone here to speak against? As I mentioned, this will most likely be held over, but if, at which time you will be able to speak before or in opposition to the application at that time. Number 7, 1806 Wolf Ridge Road, which is a subdivision, and the zoning recommendation. Is the applicant present? Yes, sir. Are you in agreement with all of the recommendations? Okay. Anyone here to speak for? Anyone to speak against the project? All right, well, that concludes our, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were coming down for that. People leave, so I didn't know.
My name is Charles Matthews. My address, P.O. Box 180471, Mobile, Alabama. And all this is new to me. This is the first time that I actually heard that they were going to build this subdivision area there. And I received a letter, and, you know, this is common practice. I think they just send it out if your property is adjoining it. I have some concerns that I know the city and, you know, the engineers and so forth address now in the city of Mobile about the drainage, what kind of impact that this was actually going to have on my property that was in that area. And again, I really don't know if I'm approaching the right person, but this is a start because I did receive the letter the first time I heard about it. My property is to the north. It's about 27 acres to the north of it. And am I at the right place? Do I need to talk to somebody in the city planning? Because I know probably 10 or 15 years ago, the city actually had planned at one time to do some things along Mud Creek, some developments for the city. They were actually, I think, at one time going to use that for like a commercial park. Again, I'm at a loss here. Is there anybody I could talk to that would address me or let me know? I am in the right place.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the questions I had was,
Let's answer the
yes, sir,
drainage first.
please.
You want to take care of the drainage question?
What kind of effect is it going to have on my property? Is this going to enhance the property? Or is this going to be, I'm going to get a lot of additional runoff that somebody's going to say, well, I'm sorry, but this has become a holding pond, Mr. Matthews, and your property is now just a holding pond. Because I noticed in the article that I was reading in here, I was trying to educate myself, that apparently there's some old, I guess I'd say old laws on the book that are codes that if you had the property before another ordinance was passed, that you could actually get away with dumping the water wherever it fell. And again, I'm at a loss.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And where is your property? You say you're north of the site?
Okay, this is the first time I've seen it, but yes. You see, actually, the Wolf Ridge Manor, the little neighborhood there, you're familiar with Holloman's Circle that comes down on the bottom? Yes, that's correct, along there. If you go to the north there, that section right there is my property that you're on, and I believe that site, that one right there is adjoining. Yes, that parcel and the parcels up in there, that is correct.
Okay. Just initially now, the applicant has not submitted drawings or anything for
Yes.
the development. But one thing that is noted here is there's a number of flood zones, number of wetlands located on the property. It doesn't look like they'll be developing those. They'll be in a common area. So that large area on the east side looks to remain undeveloped. And that's generally, it looks like where the drainage goes now, and it goes to the east from there. So I mean, I can't say for certain, but it doesn't look like there will be any impact on your property unless they were to try and dam up some property and back up water onto you, because you look like, initially looking at some of the topo that's shown on here, that your property is up higher than that property. So, and also the other thing, when they do come in to develop, if it gets approved, one thing we look at is to make sure that the drainage does not affect adjoining property
Okay.
owners.
I don't want to spend so much time because I'm not really educated. This is the first time I've seen this site plan map. Is there a resource that if I just wanted to kind of pursue and say, I'd like to see, get a copy of this and maybe just kind of feel like I had a little more information? Are y'all the engineering department or? So, City of Mobile, engineering, and then this is?
Planning Department.
Planning. Oh, wonderful. Okay. I don't really want to take up any more time on this. I know I'm going to think of something.
I'm not sure if George mentioned, they have to submit a drainage plan
Yes,
to
sir.
the city
Yes, sir.
to comply with our ordinances before they get a permit. So the
And-
engineering department will sign off on that.
And I want it to be understood that I'm all for the city, developing and growing. It's just, again, you have some concerns when you receive a certified letter. And maybe I'd like to find out who's buying also, so something can happen. One more thing I'd like to address the city about, the planning or whoever I need to do. I have a question. Is there anything that, this Wolf Ridge Manor was like stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 is the parcel that I own. Is there anything that the Planning Commission may suggest, and I don't know if I'm stepping out of bounds here, that would be a lucrative deal for them and myself?
Yeah, you're
Could we build like a big skyscraper overlooking the business park?
Department, I'm saying we're not going to answer that question right now.
Okay. Well, I've got a way to get in contact, I hope, and this is all I need as far as information to come
That's all the information they have about this.
and come see you, and you are who?
She's a planner, also happens.
Come to plan. Okay.
Third floor in this building.
Thank you, and thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And the
you.
applicant's here, correct? Whoever is representing. I have some questions, especially since the gentleman has kind of opened the door for his questions. Thank you. The subdivision, which we saw that up there in the different lots that you're putting onto this property, but it says that you're rezoning from I-1 to B3 for lots 1 through 9. So 1 through 9 become B3, and then I-1 for lots A and 10 through 24. Do you know the use? And it's already zoned, so we're really, I'm not, yeah, please do. Because I'm as confused as the gentleman.
I'm sorry, Bobby, if I can't do it, you can pick
Go
up.
right ahead.
Okay, it may help to look at the existing zoning map. When this was rezoned back in the 90s, there was a street proposed that was going to come in and do this. So the zoning that exists today followed the plat of that proposed street. And then you had B3 on one side adjoining the residence, and then the I-1 for the balance here. Because of topo, wetlands, and various other issues, in designing a street, it's going to have to take a curve like this. You can kind of see the plat of the old street, the previously proposed street here in this dashed line. The areas that are shaded are the ones that are having to be rezoned so that the lots correspond to the proposed zoning districts. So this part here, which is now I-1, is going to go B3. This little sliver here, which is now B3, is going to go to I-1. So again, that it follows the lot and street lines.
So isn't that split zoning?
No, ma'am, we're making this change to keep it from being split zoning. This dashed line here, curving around, going down the middle of the street, that's the existing zoning line between B3 and I-1. And as you could see, as it exists, it would then split zone these lots here
Yes.
and these lots here. So with this application, they're proposing to have the zoning follow the lot lines and new street lines.
But it's one subdivision, except for those.
It's one subdivision, but it will follow the lots and the street lines, just like it did previously, but they did not build or record that street. The previous street literally turned and went due north-south.
And that was the B3 to protect the neighborhoods.
Yes, ma'am, and they're still proposing the B3 here as well.
And it's one subdivision, but within it, anything that's on that other side of that dash, and now that shaded area can be I-1. Do I have that right?
Okay, I-1 will be here,
And then up,
and then it's going to take this.
and then
No, ma'am, it's going to follow. Now, Bobby, I can't remember, is this B3 or I-1?
I think that one is supposed to.
I believe that's
be an
I-1, yeah, that
Not
lot
in the
here.
It's out, it's completely outside of. the
Correct.
existing.
Staying the same.
Correct. So, I-1 along here.
Thank you. Do you know what the I-1s, you don't have any idea what those I-1
No,
uses?
ma'am, we're
There's
just,
gonna
we're just
be
hired to do
open
the
land?
subdivision at this
Sure.
part. No, haven't gotten that far along so far.
Okay.
The
Thank
other
you.
thing I do want to point out is on their previous rezoning, they had voluntary condition and use restrictions attached to those rezonings. They have attached those same use restrictions to this application as well.
Is that in our packet?
Yes, ma'am, I don't think it was quite as extensive as what you saw on number 1, but the list is included.
I remember seeing that, okay. What page would it be on our number 7? Do you know?
Oh, is that on number 8 for the I-1 district, the proposed to prohibit the following uses?
Oh, here it is.
Yeah, page 8, two paragraphs above the recommendation.
And these were the exact same ones as the first?
Yes, ma'am.
Rezoning? Okay. And you made that an automatic condition to the rezoning as well, when we approve it? Okay, thank you.
Would you like to make any further any comments?
No, if that's,
Okay,
if that's all.
That's fine.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, if there's no other questions from the commission, we'll move into the public deliberation phase, or the deliberation phase. Number 1, 2907, 2911 Dolphin Street. We'll take the items separately. The PUD, the applicant has reviewed the staff recommendations and has no questions with them.
I'll make a motion to approve the PUD citing findings of fact E and F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The PUD passes. The second item is the planning approval.
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry.
Some findings of facts, A, B, and C.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The planning approval is passed. The zoning recommendation,
I'll make that motion, adding bingo, liquor store, and liquor store to the voluntary use restrictions.
Second.
what about the,
Hours of operation.
the,
It's already in there.
It's already in there.
The hours of operation are included.
okay.
Also, I did want to point out, we have begun trying to cite one of the reasons for rezoning, maybe item D, the subdivision of land into urban sites,
okay.
makes it necessary and desirable.
All right, I'll make the motion for rezoning citing action, item number D, and adding liquor store and bingo to the voluntary use restriction.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The zoning recommendation is approved. Number 2, 130 west of Navco Road and 200 south of Farnell Drive. It is recommended for tentative approval.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Number 3, 300 St. Louis Street.
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Number 4 has been requested to be held over to April 2nd. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The holdover passes. New rezoning applications, number 5, 256 and 260 St. Louis Street and 257 St. Anthony Street. Is there a motion?
Motion so made.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. New group applications, it's 7960 Old Government Street. Both items have been recommended to hold over to February 20th. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Properly motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will be held over. And the final item, number 7, 1806 Wolf Ridge Road. We'll take these separately.
Ms. Denson?
Yes.
If I may, on the rezoning, staff had included the recommendation of compliance with the engineering comments. Typically, we do not include that condition in the rezoning because once they get the actual detailed plans, if one of those conditions is not applicable or needs alteration, then the applicant has to go back through the entire rezoning process. So we would like to revise our recommendation to remove the engineering conditions. The applicant will still have to comply with the engineering department requirements. We simply do not want to make that a part of the zoning ordinance, rezoning the property.
And which item is that? Is it specifically listed?
Number 2 on the rezoning.
All right. We'll take these separately. The subdivision for the Wolf Ridge Business Park.
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now for the rezoning of the property.
Move to approve removing item number 2, engineering comments.
Is there have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there any other business? All right, well, thank you very much. We're adjourned.